I'm Marco Giordano, and this is SEO in 2025.
Marco, what's your number one SEO tip for 2025?
Well, to get familiar with basic analytics, because now SEO is getting more dependent on data. It's always been, but with the most recent technologies and even changes by Google, plus the advancements of companies, because now companies are getting more familiar with IT, it's possible to do much more things compared to, say, 3 years ago.
So what analytics knowledge do SEOs need to know about?
Well, understanding, for example, GSC, Search Console, and GA4 data, the bare minimum, as you must report on the results of SEO, how organic traffic is contributing to the business, as well as custom events. Because in GA4, you can create your custom events or even your custom dimensions, and they allow to enrich your analysis. For example, if you have to label or cluster some pages on your website, you can use GA4 and create some custom dimensions. Or if you want to track specific actions on your website, you can use Tag Manager in GA4 to track these specific actions and then use them in your reports. And this is quite important. The stuff out of the box, what you get out of the box, is usually very basic and poor. Most companies want something more custom and getting more familiar with how these platforms work, but even with the most abstract side of data, which is abstract, like strategy, processes, and even communication can get you far.
I guess the challenge with GA4 is it's got many different layers, and there's always something more complicated that you can do with it. Surely SEO shouldn't be responsible for having to find out everything about GA4.
Yeah, I agree. You shouldn't go into super depth. Like, you shouldn't be a master of GA4, because I don't even use all of it. Even if you are specialized in GA4, most of the things you will never use, depending on your clients, depending on your job, and so on. You should just find equilibrium into what is useful. And what I recommend, because that's actually quite important, especially if you work for a medium or a large company, which is the case for many, use the linking, the BigQuery linking you have in GA4 to get your data straight to BigQuery, this data warehouse solution by Google, where you get raw data from GA4 that are not affected by the usual limits of GA4, because Google lets you use GA4, but there are some quota limits, some limits to avoid overusage. But I think it's actually to make you pay for the paid solution or to use BigQuery. And these limits can be bypassed, by using BigQuery. For example, thresholding, sampling, a lot of negative effects of your data, even cardinality, which is when you have a dimension with a lot of unique values, a lot of them. Because using GA4, if you use reports, standard reports, or even if you use explorations, are not as complete as BigQuery. So this is something I recommend learning, which is hard at the beginning. It's not user-friendly at all. Requires you to know some SQL, requires you to understand a little bit of how the cloud works. But it's not that hard. You should be done in 1 month of study, which is not much in my opinion. And most of it you can do yourself. There are a lot of tools online, even AI, that can help you write basic code. And this is something good to have instead of learning the platform GA4. Because for medium large companies, just use BigQuery. It's better in terms of data.
And I'm just looking into the different tiers that BigQuery offer, and obviously they have a free tier, gives customers up to 10 gig of storage, up to 1, I think it's terabyte of queries, free per month, and other resources. So I would imagine those levels are enough for most organizations.
I don't recall the exact numbers by heart. I think so, but most companies never go beyond these, limits. They never go beyond. But even if you go beyond, storage is not that expensive. Pulling data, doing queries can be expensive, depending on how you do them. But this is mostly for the engineers to guide you. Of course, you can also study it.
And is it also the case with GA4 where you can only go back so far in time with your data as well? And if you automatically import it into BigQuery, then that's not an issue. So yeah.
Yeah. Explorations, yeah, you have two months, which is kind of a scam, because if you're not technical and you have GA4 and you don't set up this data retention to be 14 months, you only get the last 2 months, which is terrible.
Yeah, I mean, you can't compare year on year.
Yeah, but even if you do 14 is less than 24, you cannot do a comparison year over year. It's easier to just start loading BigQuery, even though it's not retroactive. It's better than nothing.
Yeah, start now. Absolutely. And is this something that SEOs, though, should be doing themselves, or should they get a GA4 professional to do it for them?
I think it's overrated. Like, a lot of the stuff I told you can be easily done by yourself. It's not that hard. And to be honest, in SEO, priority goes to GSC and then to GA4. Anyway, because GSC is the first SEO tool. And GSC is offering another link. It's called the BigQuery, the bulk export, So you can put your data to BigQuery as well. It's much easier than GA4 in terms of actual data. When you see the tables, the data in BigQuery, it's actually easier than GA4 to understand. Start from there. Doesn't take much, to be honest. The issue is that GSC is removing a lot of anonymized data, the famous anonymized queries, and BigQuery gives you this anonymized data. Okay, so you get many more rows compared to what you get with the API. Put in that sense, much more, like an higher number, even 200% more, depending on how big your website is. If it's super big, you get a lot more. But I think that these are technicalities. Like, people stick too much to technicalities because businesses don't care. Yes, of course, if you have a discrepancy, you have to communicate it to the managers, to whoever you're reporting to, because it's important. But in terms of numbers, I don't stick too much to the accuracy or this trivia, I just Google them. The most important thing is understanding how to put all of this into a process, into a system, and how to communicate it effectively. Because otherwise it's all fluff, it's technical knowledge, like school knowledge, interesting facts without any physical real-world application. That's why it's important to understand the processes, how a business can actually use this data, if they can.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, talking about application, I'd love to maybe talk through a few examples of how SEOs should use the insights in their analytics to inform their SEO strategy. So what data should SEOs be looking at on an ongoing basis, and how should that impact the way that they're carrying out their SEO activities?
Yeah, the data they should look at is largely reliant, depending, you can say, on the model of the website. If you have an e-commerce, we can say traffic is less important. I mean, it's still important, but you care about the sales, conversion rate, your average order value, and other metrics, okay? But if you are a publisher, for example, and you are monetizing with ads, you want a lot of traffic from the US because it pays more. It's fine. You are not selling any product, so you cannot track sales because you don't have products, right? So the metrics are largely reliant to what you're doing. Usually, you should always track the financial metrics, because SEO, actually not SEO, any marketing channel should always be tied to the money-making aspect of a business, to the business, number one. And of course, they should track, for example, content decay, how to see if the content is losing traction, if you have content on your website. If you are Amazon, there is nothing, there is no content, there is nothing. It's not the New York Times, but you can track, for example, what are, in that case, if you sell products, if you're an e-commerce, you can even check what are the products that get usually sold together, if your CMS is not offering that by default.
So content decay, sorry to jump in there. How would you go about tracking that, and what metrics do you look at? I mean, for instance, do you look at simply the number of organic visits over time?
I think I told you last year, I don't recall, but about that, I usually take the clicks or any other metric. If you want to do only for SEO, take clicks, because clicks come straight from Search Console. It's all organic traffic from Google. It's not all the organic traffic, it's just from Google. Otherwise, you take your favorite GA4 traffic metric, users, sessions, views, anything goes. Your favorite one, total users, your favorite traffic metric. You can filter to select organic traffic, or maybe all the channels. It depends on your goal, the question you're trying to answer. And I use a method which says that for every page, right, for every page, you have this tendency, you have this trend over time. Every page is getting clicks, let's say for 6 months. I just take the slope of this imaginary line. It's like you create a line for every page. You take the slope, and based on the slope, you can tell if there is decay or not. Because according to middle school / high school mathematics, no, this slope is measuring growth or decay, or even if there is nothing happening. If it is close to 0, nothing is going on. And this value can help you, of course, with proper filtering, of course, to understand if something is decaying or is growing over time. It's a quick and efficient method, or you can just use the good old pivot tables, some conditional formatting to see how each page or even each cluster is changing over time in terms of performance. And if you're good with conditional formatting, you should see that some cells should be highlighted. I know it's a very simple method, but it works because it's visual, and you can see, for example, where are the biggest variations or where you had the most clicks or users, any metric you decided on, and that's it.
Is it not possible to automate this just so that you get an alert if
Yeah,
it is.
I usually do. There are too many ways depending on the stack you're working with. You can even do it in Google Cloud. You can put, how can I say? You can do your calculation, and then if you have some values that exceed a threshold via some automation, you can get an email or decide what to do, like decide any action you can do. You can also do something more complex if you want with Airtable. So Airtable, it's like a database / spreadsheet, we can say. And with the help of Make or Zapier, which are, we can say, connectors, these tools to automate things, you can send warnings, send this data to other platforms or even to Google Sheets, wherever you want. So automation is infinite. You can automate whatever you want. The important is understanding the process from a business standpoint, and then you think about the technical stuff. I usually think before about the business, and it's 2024, so most of this stuff now it's easy because we have the tools, right?
Nearly 2025. That's why we're recording SEO in 2025, yeah.
Right. We're in 20. We will, okay, right. It's actually easy because we have a lot of tools. You don't even need to create it yourself. You can look for solutions. But even without them, I would say now it's quite simple. You can read some tutorials online. The thing where companies struggle, where people struggle, are not the operational things, like actually doing your job. Is the strategic side and, of course, the business side, because many people don't want to study the business side. It's true. Some technical people hate it, don't like to do it for some reason.
Well, I guess, it's also because the metrics, you've been saying that the amount of analysis or automation that you can do is infinite. And that's the challenge, isn't it? It's deciding what are the important metrics to be focusing on. How do you help a business decide the key metrics?
Yeah, so for the key metrics, I usually start from their goals or what they want to achieve. Some people start from the metrics, but no, you start from what they want to achieve, where they want to be, and then it also fits your strategy. It overlaps. You also decide your KPIs, your most important metrics, but I don't want to overcomplicate it because I hate overcomplicating this simple stuff. For example, if you're a publisher, let's say you're a publisher and you're just having subscriptions or ads, right? It's very simple. You make money if people read you. The more people read you, the more money you make. It's very simple. There is nothing to understand. If you're in e-commerce, it can get a little bit more complex because, yes, you can make more sales and make more money, but not all the products have the same markup. Not all the products are equal. Sometimes it's better to sell a lower quantity of products with a higher margin compared to, 1,000 glues. It's better to sell one Ferrari or Lamborghini compared to 1,000 glues, whatever. This is what I mean. I don't want to oversimplify too much, but usually I ask their goals. I try to understand what they want to achieve in practice, because sometimes the goals are very, muddy, very generic, We want, for example, we want to be the best in the automotive industry. Like this is, how can I say, this is not a tangible goal. It's not very realistic. Like
It's not measurable. Yeah.
yeah, it's not measurable, but even if it were measurable, it's kind of, a utopia. It doesn't make much sense. But for example, if your goal is to increase by 20% your sales, well, your KPI, guess what? It's sales. No, you can gauge your progress by checking if your sales were actually increasing by that much. Sometimes it's a little bit harder, but usually I try to stick to the basic common sense metrics, which are always financial or, okay, usually people talk about revenue and the most important, of course, profit. Then you can also have other stuff, conversion rates, or even CTR on a page. How many people are clicking on this link? How many people are clicking on this CTA? And so on. That's also kind of conversion rate. But in some cases, if you do automation or if you move outside of SEO and talk about automation as a whole, the most important thing to consider is also how you are saving in terms of cost. So how much money you're saving. For example, if you have a process taking you, 100 hours every month, right? It would be 1,200 hours per year. Okay? Which is a lot. To be honest, it's a lot of hours. And of course, every hour requires people to work. So people are paid to work and, it's wasted productivity because they're using their productivity for these 1,200 hours. If you find an automation process that is converting these hours into, just 12 hours from 1,200 to 12, you are saving a lot of money, even though it's not revenue. We're not talking about revenue. You are not selling anything. You are just saving money. You're just optimizing your processes, which saves money in exchange because these people can work on other tasks that are more profitable, or they can increase the overall productivity, which in the end will make you more money. So automation is not just about the basic stuff, revenue, profit, selling. Can also be about your efficiency and improving what you're doing. So the cost you don't see or you cannot see.
If an SEO is struggling for time, what should they stop doing right now so they can spend more time doing what you suggest in 2025?
Theory for sure is one, and focusing on being too siloed, because now, in particular, I would say that omni-channel, it's more attractive. It's always been better, but now it's clear that you can. I don't recommend doing only SEO. You should be a little bit more, a generalist, a little bit more. So less theory, let's focus on patterns, let's focus on the theoretical aspects, because if you check the SERPs, they are terrible. Really, some stuff doesn't make any sense, but we should be more practical, more realistic, and embrace reality. So less theory, more focus on this stuff, but not too much. I don't want people to focus too much on coding or on the techie side, because it's still about business. Focus more about how you can use this knowledge, for example, how you can use BigQuery, how you can use even Looker Studio, anything about data, and make it more relevant to the business in terms of processes and systems, because it's all about that. I see many people that they focus too much on coding. But the problem is that if I am a company, I don't want to hire you. You're not a developer, you're just an SEO. But even if you do another job, why should I hire you? I just hire a developer. These complementary, these supporting skills are good because they make you a better SEO, or they make you a better marketer, they make you a better engineer, and so on. So they are complementary skills that you are using to reinforce yourself. But the end goal is always the business. So creating processes, putting them into practice, and saying, okay, now we've talked about SEO. Now let's see how we can execute SEO and make something faster compared to other tools. For example, with the process I propose, it's faster, cheaper, and we're actually using our assets, so our data. So this is something, it's more consistent for a company, and it's more reasonable compared to telling them, yeah, I know Python, I can code. Yeah, sometimes I code. it's not very actionable. But if you tell them something like that, I can create a process, I can make use of these technologies to achieve that or to do that, it's much more, realistic.
Marco Giordano is a data and web analyst. You can find him over at SEOtistics.com. Marco, thanks so much for being part of SEO in 2025.
No problem.
I've been your host, David Bain. Get your copy of SEO in 2025, the book, over at SEOin2025.com.